Yes, we can.
So let's begin with a small introduction. Hello, guys. It's Upamanu Chakraborty again with another session of our web-based learning uh, platforms from experts. Are you excited to learn about today's topic? Well, you must be because I'm super excited to enrich myself while sitting at home in this pandemic situation. Good evening and welcome to our 6th week's presentation on talks on various aspects of wildlife and conservation. Before proceeding, I have a short announcement for our viewers. First of all, thanks for the immense support from the very first day of our attempt. Thanks for being with us, even in some technical issues and the network connection problems where the flow of the sessions has repeatedly been fluctuated. We feel terrible about that. We are trying to ensure a better streaming experiences for you as the members from the organizers panel are all busy with their work pressure. It is not always possible to have a session every weekend, so we came up with an idea to have one or maximum two sessions per month, and that too will maintain the quality of the program, or else the number will increase but eventually the quality will be affected. So let's try Microsoft Team for this week. Let's see what happens. How is the streaming procedure? Everyone is requested to send feedback about the streaming experience to us via email. The attempt is purely personal without any NGO or organizational involvement. So platforms that are free is a priority. You can send your valuable suggestions to us too. So now moving on to our today's topic, and that is the Birdmen of India. That is a soulful history on the journey of birdwatching from ancient India to what we call the modern techniques, and that tributary goes to all of the personalities whom we cherish for their pioneer works and the birds that are named after them. We have an eminent birdwatcher with us. You may have seen his works, and many of you are probably okay. So many of you probably know him and familiar to his works. I welcome Sujan Chatterjee from Birdwatcher Society. Before starting, please put your audio and video off for better streaming experience and use the chat box for your queries. So Sujanda, over to you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Yeah, I mean, birdwatching is my hobby and my passion and work. But the history of birdwatching is very intriguing. But I'm not. I have done most of my research while preparing for this talk, actually. So I might be not as fluent as I would have wanted to, because there is a lot of information over here which is new for me. I mean, a lot of names. I know the whole gist of the whole matter, but I'll be not as fluent as I would have thought I would be. But first of all, I named this program as the Bird People of India rather than Bird. Can you guys please mute your phones on speakers? That's number one. And I'm calling this Bird People of India because there are not just men involved, there are also ladies involved. And the ladies were not necessarily collectors, but they were mostly artists, and they have contributed to a lot of paintings over a period of time. And a lot of birds have been named after the ladies. Mind you, if you see a bird scientific name, the species name finishes with IAE, is usually named after a woman. So that's the norm. If a bird named like Gouldii, if it finishes off with IAE, it is by for Mrs. Gould. If it's Gouldie, then it's Mr. Gould. So that's the international norm of naming after men and women. So I did know this. This came up while doing the research for this project. So bird watching is a very new phenomenon. Bird study through nomenclature and collection was happening the last couple of centuries. And before that, in the very ancient history, there was mostly like observation of birds that were around people, mainly the prominent ones. It cannot be called the scientific work of today's modern, as we know. But there are reference of of very specific birds in various historical books. So one of them is called the Mriga Pakshi Shastra. So this is the English translation of a uh, Sanskrit textbook of science of birds and animals. Now said to be by Jain author from 13th century. There has been a lot of translations from Sanskrit names. Some of them are kind of conjectures of what it could be, because a lot of the names have changed, a lot of names have varied. Like the word Hamsa, which probably means geese, because Hamsa is also referred for swans, but because Indian history not necessarily means today's political boundaries. Indian history started all the way from Afghanistan and further western part of the world. There were a lot of swans in that area, so it's a bit of a mixture over there. But again, 13th century AD, we are getting some reference of birds. So Dr. Raghuvira, in his publication of Indian nomenclature of birds of India, Burma, and Ceylon, he tried to identify around 250 Sanskrit names of Indian birds. Not all of them have been perfect, but at least he tried to get 250 different bird names from old Sanskrit texts. So that's a huge thing. And bird migration has always intrigued people, because which is why in the literature it has been mentioned, because it's a seasonal thing. There's huge number of flocks of birds coming in across the mountain and spreading across the countryside. And again, as the summer comes back, the birds disappear. So this has obviously caught the attention of various authors and poets, and so that they have been documented in various historical books. Poet Kalidas was obviously declared as one of the who had some write-ups like on the Rajhamsa and the Kadamba, which is grey-lag geese, and is coming in from the mountains. So there was a bit of observation going on from a literature point of view, from an amateur. These won't be considered as scientific, but still, it does come across the mountains into the place. So I think this is one very old record of bird migration in our history. Then the quail and its habit of root parasitism was well documented in the Vedic books, and it was described much before Aristotle's books started coming out of the European school. So amateur observation has always been there. Not necessarily they were all documented, but there still we can get some inkling that people were always interested in the birds around them, the animals around them, what is going on, because obviously there was a lot of dependence on nature from plants, medicinal plants, etc. So people have been interacting with nature very closely, from not just from the point of a bird watching, but also from the point of food, because wild bird was part of the food and the diet of those days. So what you eat, which season you eat, and what you don't eat, they were all part of the whole system. And then later we come down to Mughal times. The Mughal emperors, at least from Babur to Shah Jahan, they were all nature lovers. So they have all kind of accounts of writing of nature, and there are descriptions of monal pheasants. Babur, in his subtle humor, writes about the remarkable circumstance. In winter, they come down the hill and they pass over the vineyard, and then God knows the truth. It's the flesh which is savory. So obviously there was a bit of food involved over there. Monal was a game bird. And but after that, even though in Humayun and Akbar's time there was a bit of nature observation, but during Jahangir, it really took a shape, because Jahangir was deeply interested in wildlife. And those days, people used to have menageries or zoos where they had animals and birds, where they could observe them, because it was days before when you had binoculars, you could see a bird from a distance. So it was usually through hunting or as a pet keeping or in a zoo as an exotic animal, you could observe your birds around you. But again, during Jahangir's time, there are records of him observing wild saras cranes laying eggs and hatching them. There's a whole data on that also. And Jahangir, in those days, they used to have the court artists. So he had the famous Ustad Sur, who used to do all the exotic bird drawings for him. And as you can see, Jahangir is here on the right. He's riding a horse with a falcon sitting in his hand. And these are some of the art by Mansoor. You can see there's a tragopan. There is a parrot, which probably is a vernal hanging parrot. There's some. There's this blue-throated barbet on the right, which is very classic and very good representation of the bird. There are some sand grouse, and the best one is the one in the middle. This is a dodo. Now, dodo disappeared before modern science even knew what was going on, and it became extinct before people even understood what is going on. But here you can see that dodo has been painted almost 160 years before the bird was actually described to science, the modern science, because the dodo was there in Jahangir's zoo, and it was gifted to him by the Europeans who came across the sea through Mauritius, and they were there. So it's a unique. This is a very classic picture of extinct bird, which is there painted by the Jahangir's artists. These are some of another one. This is another classic example of the Siberian crane. The Siberian cranes used to come to India in Bharatpur in fairly okay number, up to 60, 70 birds, and by end of 2000s they kind of disappeared and they became extinct. Now, Siberian crane as a species do survive, but the western race of Siberian crane has become extinct now. This bird was drawn in the 15th century, and it was described to science in 1773 by a Russian. So this was well before the so-called modern science came up and started describing them. And there on the right is a beautiful picture of the flameback. This is most likely the lesser flameback or the black rump flameback as we know it today. Beautifully painted. This is kind of a time span of between 1780. Now we are coming to a bit more modern, because after Jahangir there is not much record of bird observation or wildlife observation as such well documented. But then we come into the European era where the so-called modern science has come into being. So this is a kind of timeline of how it all developed over the years. From 1780, then the Asiatic Society came up. After 1810, the Indian Museum came up, and these people are there at the same time. The Sykes, Blythe, Jordan, Humes, Blandford, they were all contributing with a lot of overlaps in between them. And the bird books were coming up, Gould's Birds of Asia, BNHS has come up, and then, ZSI has been formed by early 1900s. Then the bird books have started coming up until the Ripley Guide of the 10 volumes. And again, parallelly, if you look at the bottom, the top one is of the Indian. But at a similar time, the birding was also happening, bird science was also gathering momentum in the European sector and the American sector. A similar timeline. So I think we were pretty lucky that everything was happening for India at the same time as the whole world was learning about birds. And one of the first guys who was here, his name was Dr. Edward Bulkley. He's wrongly referred as Buckley. He's not Buckley, he's Bulkley. And he was stationed, he was East India Company surgeon and was posted in Madras. He was a pioneer naturalist, of course. And he sat over there and drew these paintings in black and white. And he wrote small journals and was corresponding with the Jesuit botanist called George. and George Joseph Kamel, and he acted as an intermediary between Kamel and Pittiger, and they brought out this book. And then from his black and white paintings, some birds were described in those days. One of them was the paradise flycatcher, which was of course called the Corvus paradisi then, and the Indian pied wagtail, which is the white-browed wagtail as we know it today. So those came up from these black and white paintings and described as new to science. So Berkeley also has another credit to his name. He did the first postmortem in India, which involved a death of a person very close to him who was hit. These two British guys, they beat each other up and cracked their skull. So he did a full-on postmortem, which was presented to the court, and the guy got he got acquitted from the charges. So that is also one of his his specialties. He did the first postmortem in India. So after that, I mean, there are a lot of people who are involved in bird watching, or not bird watching, the ornithology and the collection. I have not gone through every one of them. I've tried to pick the top ones. So we have next guy. This is John Latham, or Latham, and he wrote his book called The General Synopsis of Birds, which brought together description of all the known birds. But it was not until 1790 in his India Ornithologicus that he gave scientific names to the birds. Until then, it was just common names of the birds. And he was a remarkable guy. At 81 years old, he began publishing the General History of Birds, which was the 11 volumes, which you can see on the right side of your screen. So at the age of 81, he was publishing his first proper 11 volume of bird books, and he produced it over a period of 7 years. But of course, these were mostly done through taxidermy. There was a lot of mistakes, and later they were all criticized. But again, those were the days, when things were different and everything was all pioneered and new. So you can see some of the birds that we know today: the trogon. Then there is the white-browed wagtail. This is most likely the greater adjutant stork, going by the long pouch, and of course the greater racket-tailed drongo that we have today. After that, we have our first lady. So, Lady Gwilym, and she was married to a judge in the Madras High Court. But she was an artist, and she made 200 watercolors, and beautiful watercolors. You can see the samples over here. They are absolutely exquisite, as good as any modern bird plates that we see today. And these were produced 20 years before Audubon's books came out. So in natural postures, very, very accurate. And she also painted fish and flowers, etc. Along with, she did a whole series of natural history painting, not just birds. We are sticking to the birds today. And these were absolutely exquisite. Apart from her bird painting, she is known for her letters now in the British Library, which describe the contemporary Indian culture also, and the description of Devdasis and their role in the society. So people were not just doing birds in their free time; they were also studying our Indian lifestyle and writing about it. And she died in 1807 in Madras, and her grave is still in Madras. And then some people say that her artistic work was influenced by Thomas Bewick. The name comes up to Bewick's swan. And so it is, many of the birds were brought to her by people. Of course, those days the women did not go out with their gun to shoot birds. So they were brought in as specimens, dead specimens or live specimens. People used to have them in their gardens, in their backyard, in cages. And that's how they used to paint these birds. And so they also have a magnolia, which was given a new genus by her name, the Gwilymia, to honor her. So after that, we pick another guy. He's Pierre Sonnerat. So he's French, and his name it comes up with the grey jungle fowl. and you can see the Gallus sonorati. And he was not just in India; he was across the whole. He was seafaring guy. He kept moving from one place to the other, and he was also in Madagascar. It was called Malagasy those days. And when he spotted a lemur, and somebody shouted Indri, which in Malagasy means look, and Sonoret thought that's the name, so he called it the Indri. So they still call the Indri, and the scientific name was the Indri, which means look, look. So that's what he picked up. It's like the kangaroo, which means I don't know in Australia. So this is Sonoret made a lot of mistakes. These are fun mistakes, but they are still there. Nothing has changed from there. One of them is nothing to do with India, but here's this bird, which we all know as the laughing kookaburra. He calls it the Dasylo Novagini, or the New Guinea bird. So laughing kookaburra doesn't exist in New Guinea. But and another bird which he named as the Psychoceles papua, which is a Gentoo penguin. So penguins don't exist in Papua. So these are the two mistakes he made, but the names are still there. It has not changed. The names have stuck, and they have remained as mistakes of Sonoret. So he is Sonoret on the right. He's sitting in the field somewhere, most likely in New Guinea, where a woman is holding up a parrot and he's sketching it while sitting in the field. Then we have Mary Impey lived in Calcutta. Mary Impey's name comes up through the monal pheasant, which is called the Lophophorus impeyanus. It used to be called the Impey's monarch before, but later it became Himalayan monarch. And she was an English lady, national historian, patron of arts in Bengal. She was married to Elia Impey, Chief Justice of Bengal since 1977. And she established a zoo. In those days, they were called menageries in Calcutta, and commissioned Indian artists to paint various creatures. So here are some of the samples on the right side of the screen. The black-necked stork, the comb duck, the Indian hornbill, the oriental pipe, and then most likely the sparrowhawk female down here. So he had three. She also kept extensive notes about habitat and behavior, where as and when it was possible, which were actually used by biologists later. And she had three artists who were Sheikh Zain al-Din, Bhavani Das, and Ram Das, who did almost 300 paintings of birds. So here are some samples of one. On the top left is another extinct bird by Bhavani Das, the pink-headed duck. At the bottom is Ram Das's spot-billed pelican, and on the right, very classical Sheikh Zain al-Din is the. Now this looks like an Indo-Chinese roller in today's format, but yeah, I will call it the Indian roller. So Sheikh Zain al-Din always like to add a bit of habitat with the birds. Then we move to the next guy, James Franklin. So he was a British soldier. He entered the service of British East India Company as a cadet in 1905, and he served with distinction on various Indian surveys and was elected as a member of the Royal Society. He was first in the Bengal cavalry with authority on geology. He undertook some surveys in the Vindhya Hills. So a lot of his birds are basically Central Indian birds, or at least close to those areas. And he collected birds for the Asiatic Society. So that is what he did. So some of the birds over here, which he was directly was authority of, are the white-eyed buzzard, the Indian eagle owl, which was split from the great eagle owl previously, the rufous-tailed lark, which is the top left, oriental skylark, tawny-bellied babbler, where is the painting on the right, Indian spotted creeper. He did collect almost 160 specimens over his lifetime and made paintings of them. So these are such a few samples of what he did. Now, as time goes, people are getting a bit more serious about birds in India. There's Colonel Sykes. So he was among the early writers on Indian birds before the publication of Jerder's Birds of India, which was like a Bible to start with. So he first came to India at the age of 13 and became part of the Indian Army, or the Bombay Army rather in those days, not Indian Army. And he saw a great deal of, he saw a bit of Maratha war, and he did a lot of collection in the Bombay Deccan area. And his well-known paper is the catalogue of the birds of the Deccan. Now, Deccan used to be called Dukun those days. So, if you see this bird, the Dukunen is basically from the Deccan area. So, Dukun, Deccan, Dukun was the name that was used then. And most of this was published in the Proceedings of the Zoological Society in London. And he described a lot of Indian birds, and he put a few Hindu deity names like the black kite, the Nilbas Govinda, the Hypolius Rama, Sykes Warbler, the Petrocincla Pandu. Then we have the Ganesha of the southern black bulbul. So these people were not just describing birds, they were connecting the birds with the Indian culture and Indian names. They were not giving it all European connections. So they were very, very closely related to the country, not just as a service person. So there was a bit more than that, bit more. Now, next is the Hodgson. The Hodgson name comes up very often because we have the Hodgson's redstart, we have the Hodgson's frogmouth, we've got all kind of Hodgson birds all over the place. So he was one of the founders of the Indian ornithology, really. So Brian Houghton Hodgson. He was the first assistant of the British resident and later resident at the court of Nepal between 1820 and 1844. So he did a lot of hill birds while he was in Nepal. And he came to India at the age of 17. And he stayed here for a long period of time. He was sent to Kathmandu in Nepal as the assistant commissioner in 1819 and became a resident in 1833. He studied Nepalese language, the people of Nepal, the culture, producing lots of paper on the language, literature, religion. So he became a Nepal specialist. So along with the Nepal people, he was specializing on the Nepal birds also, which is why you can see all of these are hill birds, which were there. And he amassed a large collection of birds and mammal skins, which he later donated to the British Museum. And he discovered scientifically 39 species of mammals and 124 species of birds, which had not been described in modern ornithology previously, of which 79 species he described himself on his own, the rest with the help of other biologists. So the zoological collections presented to the museum comprises of astounding 10,500 specimens. So that's huge. Those numbers will freak out in today's days because obviously as numbers of everything is dwindling because of lack of habitat, those numbers were very big. And in addition to these collections, there was a lot of drawing, sketches of Indian animals by native artists under his supervision. So he employed locals to do his paintings for him. So that helped a lot. He also learned Sanskrit, he learned Persian, which all helped him in his later life. He also stayed in Kumaon for a period of time and did some bird collections over there. And then some of the birds under his name, like the Tibetan partridge, Perdix hodgsonii, and then there is the Hodgson's hawk-cuckoo, Hodgson's frogmouth, the speckled wood pigeon, which is Columba hodgsoni, Hodgson's redstart, Hodgson's bush chat. So there's a whole lot of Hodgson's birds around. So after Hodgson, we have this husband and wife team of the Goulds. Now we know Goulds through the Mrs. Gould Sunbird, but there is much more to Gould because both of them were artists. And probably Elizabeth Gould, the Mrs., was a better artist than John Gould. But you know how it was those days, things got a bit hushed up because they were all joint publications. But what most people think is that Mrs. Gould did a better job of the bird as a bird artist. And these are some of the samples. And one of the bird special books that they did was The Century of Birds, the Himalayan Mountains. And later, they moved into Australia and did lots of paintings in Australia. But in India, this was one of the pioneering works of painting of the Indian birds. Here's the scarlet finch, the hoopoe, the red-billed blue magpie, the pied imperial pigeon, the minivets, and then monal pheasant. So Gould's, I mean, we obviously have one of the most beautiful, the Gould sunbird named after Mrs. Gould, Elizabeth Gould. Then we have another French explorer, Adolphe Delisle. Now, he set out on his travels in the east and reached Pondicherry. And he stayed there for some time, so he did a bit of collections over there. And then he came down into Calcutta. He does not mention going into the mountains, but he did describe black-rumped magpie, the Siva, the white-throated spine-tail, which are all hill birds. But somehow, nowhere in his journal there is any mention of him going to Bhutan and collecting these birds. But it is there. So they had some birds were described from the Nilgiris. That's where he met Jerdon, and Jerdon, and they were both working at the same time. But some of his collections, which he thought was all new to science, were eventually negated because Jerdon has already done his work, especially in southern India. So his collection really didn't matter to science as such, unfortunately. Then we have another very famous name, the Blyth. So because one of the top birds is the Blyth's tragopan, the Blyth's kingfisher, the Blyth's leaf warbler, which we all continuously confuse even now. So Blyth came out to Calcutta in 1841 to take charge of the Asiatic Society Museum. So this is when you are getting professional natural history people coming into the city. So they came here with natural history job in mind. So that changes the game slowly. You know, it becomes a bit more systematic as these people start coming into the scene. Previously, these were people who were travelers or working in some other field. They were collecting on the side. You know, not necessarily describing stuff themselves, just sending back the skins. But here now you have scientists who are coming in to work directly on the subject. So he established a systematic ornithology in India on a sound basis, but he didn't have much field work. He didn't have much time for field work because he was mostly stuck in the office. So he did a list of birds observed in the vicinity of Calcutta, because that was where he was. And he wrote a few. He wrote this after arriving in few years after he arrived. Later, number of other same journals, some of the Blyth's identification were queried by Strickland, and there's a translation of a little-known paper called The Birds of Calcutta by Sundewal, a Swede, who had spent a few months in Calcutta. So there were a lot of birding happening in Calcutta. Bird lists were being made. We are still making bird lists through eBird in Calcutta. So it will be a good opportunity later if you can match up what was there in 1825 and what we have today, how things have changed. So as Blyth started corresponding with the people abroad in his country, more and more people were getting interested in the birds that were sent across the skins. And he used to do a lot of review groups, and he did a lot of revision of publications, and he was a great assistant to Jerdon because Jerdon was preparing the book. So he was getting a lot of help from Blyth. So Jerdon's book had a lot of these things. And then there was another scientist called Layard. Layard did the books on. He's a Ceylon specialist, but Layard was there over here in Calcutta. But somehow they didn't work together for too long, and Layard separated. And he did the Notes of Ornithology of Ceylon on his own. And Blyth kept adding one appendix after the other. He did a catalogue of birds in the collection of East India Company in 2 volumes. So he was a good cataloger. Obviously, that's what museum people were. They used to make notes and put everything together, not necessarily go out in the field, but whatever they had was meticulously documented. And he wrote various articles on different species, on natural history, and much before the Origin of Species came out. So he also had an inkling of how evolution was happening, but he probably could put his finger on it. And but there was already people thinking in parallel lines with Darwin about the evolution of species. And after Blyth, we have another guy, the Jerdon. Now Jerdon was also called the father of Indian ornithology because he wrote these two massive books, The Birds of India. But he also did publish The Mammals of India in 1862. Then he brought out The Birds of India, which was the standard, a good standard work from those days. And his work was limited within the Indian boundaries, from Himalayas to Kanyakumari, and from the Indus to the Teesta and Brahmaputra in the east. So, unfortunately, Assam, Burma, Ceylon were not included in Jerdon's books because it was out of bound for him. He didn't reach those places. So his bird book describes the main peninsula and the hills of India. Obviously, later, after he had finished his second volume, and he started on working on the reptiles and fish, and that's the time he went to visit Kashmir a few times, and later he went to Khasi Hills in Assam, where he added more species of birds. He did not finish the reptile and the fish book, but if he did, he had already collected a lot of bird specimens from Assam. He would have definitely put another volume to that, but unfortunately that didn't happen. So here are some of these. You can make out these birds of this. On the right side is the Jerdon's fossa. In the top middle is the Jerdon's babbler. Down here the Jerdon's baza. So these are the names that is stuck to this man who did a lot of his works. Next we have Tickell. So Tickell obviously has given us a few birds. Tickell's leaf warbler, Tickell's thrush, Tickell's hornbill, Tickell's blue flycatcher. So these are names which we keep on calling out when we look at a bird, but not necessarily put our mind behind who was this guy and what was he doing here. So by the way, Tickell was born in India. He was born in Cuttack in Odisha, and later he became the Lieutenant General to the son of Lieutenant General Richard Tickell. But he was educated in England, but he came back at the age of 19 and joined the Bengal Native Infantry in 1829. And he served in the army for a period of time. He was made the commander of Brian Hodgson's military escort of Kathmandu. So there was two birding people traveling together. So that made life interesting over there. And he returned to Bengal in 1843 after his promotion to captain, and he moved to Burma. But in the meantime, he also had worked as a revenue surveyor in Bhagalpur, and he found himself without any experience and let his assistants do most of the work while he carried on the administrative duties. And so his survey work was riddled with errors when he handed over the work, because he didn't understand anything what he was doing. But he made a lot of contribution to the India's ornithology and the mammal study. So he had contributed a lot in the Journal of the Asiatic Society of Bengal, and he wrote under the pen name of Ornithognomon, or Old Law. These two names he used. Hume later noted that many of the notes written as these names in the field were based on observation of another amateur ornithologist, Wilson. But it was not so, it was a mistake. So Tickell, by the way, got married in Bengal. He got married to this lady, Maria Georgina, in Bankura in 1944. So he is Bengal Jamai, as you can say, even though he was married to a British. There was a kind of connection. So he He retired in 1865, lived for a period of time in France before settling in the Channel Islands. And he went blind, unfortunately, with some eye infection at later age. But Tickell has been working on 7-volume work entitled The Illustration of Indian Ornithology. But unfortunately, with his deteriorating eyesight, he was forced to abandon the work. So before his death, he donated the unfinished work to the Zoological Society of London. And unfortunately, you can see some of these paintings. So back in those days, ophthalmology was not at its best. So next, we have another guy who was not very well known. His name comes up with the leaf monkey we see in Tripura, in Sipai Jala, the fairy leaf monkey. So here was Sir Arthur Purvis Fairy. So another soldier. I mean, all these soldiers, I don't think they spend much time fighting. Most of the time they were looking at birds, which is a good thing in one way. And so he later became the first commissioner of the British Burma, which is why a lot of his birds are actually from the very far eastern side of India, with the fairy leaf monkey also far eastern corner of India. And also he went into describing the Burmese birds, the eared pitta, Pitta fiery, and then a lot of the races of the Myanmar birds are named after him, like the Myanmar race of the brown-cheeked fulveta, the Myanmar, the ashy-headed green pigeon is Treron fairy from the eastern Himalayas, which is a new split from Pompadour green pigeon. He also had another hobby of collecting coins. So he wrote books on coins of Arakan, of Pegu, and of Burma. So he had another hobby along with his birds. So after we move on to the next guy, the Titler. Now some call it Titler, but I think the right way to pronounce his name is Robert Titler. So we have the Titler's warbler, which is another very drab bird from the western part of the country. Now, he's a British soldier who served actively through India and Afghanistan. He moved into Andamans, where he described a few birds. Some of the races of Andaman birds are named after him, like the long-tailed parakeet. The subspecies is named after Titler. And Mount Harriet in Andaman, which we all go to bird, was named after his wife. So he's left a mark in Andaman through his missus. Another guy, next, Andrew Leith Adams, sorry. He also was one of the service people who came up and wrote two important papers, one in the Zoological Society dealing with the habits of birds he met in the Indian plains. And while the other one came out in the same journal was birds he observed in Kashmir and Ladakh. Now these are high altitude birds which obviously was not looked into. So in his last paper he gives full particulars of several new species he discovered and Gould describes them, including the orange bullfinch, the Tibetan snowfinch, which is called the Montifringilla adamsi, and the two forms of the Kashmir dipper. These were described by Adams, or collected by Adams rather. Those days somebody collected, somebody else described. That also happens nowadays, works hand in hand. Next one online, William Edwin Brooks. Brooks warbler, another bird that we keep on misidentifying all the time. He was a civil engineer and a collector and ornithologist born in Dublin, Ireland. And he came to India to work in the railways, and later he settled down in Canada. So during his career in India, he corresponded actively with other ornithologists in the region, especially with Hume. And he even named his third son after Hume, Alan Brooks. And I named him Alan Brooks from Alan Hume, who is also a well-known Canadian ornithologist of equal repute. So his name is there in the leaf warbler, and Brooks was admired by later workers for his very careful observation and notes on vocalization of warbler. So something we struggle even today. So he wrote on the warbler songs, which is a very important thing. He was among the first to suggest that each species of warbler had a distinctive call. Now, those who still today struggle with calls will know how difficult it is. When you describe, today we have spectrograms, we are making, we are converting sound into a writing. But those days, imagine how you describe the song. And he wrote unlimited number of publications on his Kashmir, the swans of India, the new Indian Sylvias, the imperial eagles of India, new species of Philoscopus, which of course was the Brooks leaf warbler, and skylarks of India, Indian pipits, eagles, you name it, he had written on it. So the list goes on. After Brooks, we had this most famous man, Allan Octavian Hume. Now, Hume's name resonates through everything we see, and Hume has got some other contribution also. So he obviously maintained, he started his journal on ornithology called the Stray Feathers. He was obviously a bird guy, but he was also a political reformer, and he started the Indian National Congress Party, which eventually freed India and made India independent and became the first ruling party. So he was very, very pro-Indian. He was, even though he was a British person, but he always was very pro-Indian, which got him into trouble with all his superiors, and got transferred all the time, which obviously probably worked in his favor because he kept collecting. So he had a total collection of 60,000 skins of birds, with addition of very large number of nests, 16,000 eggs, which were all eventually handed over to the British Museum, which is all there. And he formulated this in this Journal of Indian Ornithology called the Stray Feathers between 1872 and 1888. So 11 volumes containing papers by some of the most upcoming ornithologists of those times were written under his guidance. So he was the guru, the real father of bird watching ornithology in India, the more modern India. And he obviously he had he got a lot of people into this whole activity, where he came in 1883. Hume returned from a trip to Dehradun, where he stayed, to find that many of the pages of his manuscripts that he had maintained over the years were stolen and sold off as a waste paper by his servant because he forgot to pay him. And so he was so devastated that he began to lose interest in ornithology, and also because of this theft and a lot of rain caused in Shimla, which damaged a lot of his specimens in his museum. So unfortunately, these kind of butterfly effects have how it works on people. So he, lot of his collections were eventually sent to England, British Museum. It was only in 1885, after the destruction of nearly 20,000 specimens, that Dr. Sharp, started looking into all these box full of specimens that he has sent to the British Museum, and it was lying there all these years, getting wasted. So after Hume, I mean, there are a lot of overlaps in these people's existence in Indian ornithology, but I had to just pick them up according to the sequence, and had to line it up. So here is this lady, Margaret Bushby Lascelles Cockburn, easier to say Cockburn. And she was an artist, amateur artist, who lived in the Nilgiri. So a lot of birds are from the southern part of the country. She was born in Salem, so the full-on Indian, and her father was a collector of the district. And the family visited Kotagiri in summer, but settled down permanently later elsewhere. But she was a contemporary of Hume's, and she made a lot of observations on the local natural history. Many of it was reported in the works of Hume. She also made paintings of the local flora and fauna. So the National History Museum London produced a diary in 2002 which illustrates, with all the illustrations made by her of the flora and fauna of Kotagiri region. And also a lot of butterflies were collected by her in those days. Next we have Blandford, William Blandford. He's wrongly called the Blandford, which is wrong. He was a geologist and a naturalist. And he joined his brother, and both the brothers joined the Geological Survey of India, which took them, and they came to Calcutta, again the hub, in 1855. And he remained in India for 27 years until his retirement. So he was also the president of the Asiatic Society, and after retirement he took up the editorship of the Fauna of British India series. So he was more interested in zoology, especially mollusks and vertebrates. But his principal volume publication was the third volume, jointly done with Oates on the Fauna of British India series of the birds. So the plainback snowfinch was also called the Blandford snowfinch. We had the Blandford rosefinch, which was named after him. Pale-footed bush warbler used to be called Blandford bush warbler, and the name changed. And some subspecies were named after him, like the yellow-legged button quails has a Blandfordi subspecies. And he also discovered the Blandford urial, which is a subspecies of a mountain goat. That too was named after him. This is another guy. We know him in two different forms. The Mount K2 was also called the Godwin Austen, the second highest peak. So he was also another geologist, fine naturalist, a topographer, surveyor, and he worked in the Trigonometrical Survey of India. I don't know what that is. It's beyond me. But he wrote The Birds of Assam, and he described a lot of birds from the eastern part for the first time. And the Karakoram K2 peak was briefly named after him. Later it got changed. But he worked in the northeast. So there's the brown-capped laughing thrush named after Garrulus. And then there's a streak-throated barwing, used to be called the Austin's barwing. The snowy-throated babbler, which is a very rare bird we see in Namdapha, used to be called the Austin's babbler. Then one of the race of the Assam laughing thrush finishes off with his name, the Godwini. The South Assam race of the white bird Fulvetta is also called Austini. So Austin has quite a few birds named after him. And he obviously described one of these birds, over here the parrotbill, as the Suthara duffliensis. Later it became Paradoxis nepalensis. We have a next guy, Suino. Suino still confuses us with the Suino snipe, which we fail to identify forever. But he has a few birds, few other birds named after him. There is a Suino's minivet, which is now called the brown-rumped minivet. Suino was an English naturalist born in Calcutta. He's a Bong boy, Bong white boy, born in Calcutta. But he, of course, went to England for his education because there was not much happening in Calcutta those days. But he came back. He showed signs of interest in zoology by presenting a small collection of British birds, nests, and eggs to the British Museum. And in 1854, he joined the British Consular Service in Hong Kong. And therefore, he went to Amoy in 1856. In 1860, Suino was named as the first European consular representative of the island Formosa, which is Taiwan today. And Suino made a lot of discoveries to his credit. Many of the birds was first described in John Gould's Birds of Asia, like was named after the Suino's Tom Petrel, where there is a photograph, and the Suino's snipe. But he died very young at the age of 41, presumably of syphilis. We won't get into the reason why he got it and how he got it. And the next in line, Valentine Ball, Irish geologist. He joined the Geological Survey of India. He took deep interest in ornithology and became a regular contributor to the Stray Feathers, so he's contemporary to Hume. And his best known work is Jungle Life in India. He later became the director of the National Museum of Ireland. So the Andaman Scop owl is called the Otus Bali, is named after him. Along with him, other guy is George Marshall. Now, George Marshall was a colonel in Indian Army. He was brother of C.H.T. Marshall, naturalist. He was interested in birds and butterflies. Several new butterflies were described by him, along with Niesville. And he wrote The Butterfly of India, Burma, and Ceylon. And Marshall's Iora is named after him. So he discovered this bird. Then we have another two guys, James Murray and Lieutenant Colonel Edward Arthur Butler. So James Murray was a zoologist, museum curator in Karachi, and he was a member of the Natural History and Anthropological Society of Bombay, and a manager of the Victoria Natural History Institute in Karachi, and a curator of the Karachi Municipality Library. So he wrote several books on Indian birds, including Avifauna of the island of Ceylon, the edible and game birds of British India, very important, what you eat and not eat, and its dependencies of Ceylon, and Indian birds of the avifauna of British India. So these were some of the important contributions of him to Indian ornithology. Then we have Butler, another English ornithologist, British Army officer, born in the UK. He joined army as a young, in age of 21. He served in Gibraltar, India, and South Africa. And keen collector, obviously army men had enough guns and bullets to spend, and a taxidermist. So the Hughes owl is called the Strix butleri, is named after him, and the Nicobar sparrowhawk is St. Peter butleri. So he's left his mark on two of our Indian birds. Next is Eugene William Oates, English naturalist, born in Sicily, educated in England. He worked in the PWD in India. So all our waterworks, anything goes wrong in Calcutta, I think you can blame him, all the pipes. So he was in charge of that, of the PWD works in India and Burma between the period of 1867 and 1899. He compiled a catalogue of bird eggs in the Natural History Museum, and was the secretary of the British Ornithologists Union between 1898 and 1901. And some of his important works was the handbook of the birds of British Burma. This is where Burmese birds are coming into the scene. He also made the manual of the game birds of India with Blandfords, and the fauna of British India birds, the following four. Some of the races of the birds in India are named after him, and then the two prominent birds are the vivid Niltava, is named after him, the Niltava Utsi, and the Chin Hill Wren Babbler is named after him. The Chin Hill Wren Babbler, both these birds you can have to go and go to Manipur and Mizoram to see them. So small dodgy little mothers. Next, we have Aitken. He was known as EHA. He was a humorist and a naturalist and a writer, especially on the wildlife of India. So he wasn't just writing on birds, like that. So he made it look different. So he was born in Satara in Bombay and was educated in India. So this is the first full-on Indian son of soil, you can say. He never went abroad to learn. He entered the Customs and Salt Department of the Government of Bombay in 1876, and he worked in Khargoda and Goa, Ratnagiri, and Bombay itself. And later he became the Chief Collector of Customs and Salt Revenue in Karachi, and he was made the Superintendent in charge of the district of Sindh. So he was a worker for the Museum of Bombay Natural History Society, which he helped found. He was one of the founding fathers of BNHS. And many of his papers and notes are preserved in the pages of his journal, of which he was an original joint editor. So before his retirement, he was elected one of the vice presidents of the society. He wrote several books on natural history, as you can see over here. including the birds of Bombay. What he also did was he discovered a new mosquito, and it was named after him called the Anopheles aetycina. And so not just birds, he was dealing with mosquitoes also. Another guy, very serious, Stuart, a policeman. He spent most of his career in India in the Assam police. And he rose to the rank of Inspector General in 1910. He was placed on special criminal investigation duty, and a year later returned to England and took up the appointment of the Chief Police Officer of the Port of London, from where he retired. Excellent tennis player, enthusiastic big game hunter. Of course, he had his guns and his bullets. He lost his left arm to a leopard in Silchar in Assam. He studied and collected birds of India when he found time. His books include The Indian Ducks and the Allied Game Birds of India and Ceylon, Fauna of British India, Volume 7, Mishmi Manager, The Nidification of Birds of the Indian Empire and Cuckoo Problems, mostly about cuckoo. Cuckoo was his main interest in ornithology. So one of the subspecies of the common cuckoo is called the Cuculus canulus bakeri from northeast. He collected 50,000 Indian bird eggs. Today people will freak out if you try doing anything in those numbers, which he donated to the Natural History Museum. His 7-volume contribution to the Fauna of British India series became the standard reference work on the subject. So Baker has a few names added to the birds. The Ewena bakeri is one of the birds. It's a white-naped Ewena. The South Assam race of the streak-crested scimitar babbler is also named after him. The Sri Lankan race of the palm swift, and many other subspecies. After that, we have Charles Inglis. His name is Charles Inglis. He is English, and he was actually the curator of the Darjeeling Museum in India from 1926 to 1948. So the museum was run by the Bengal Natural History Society, and many of his writings were published in this journal. He was from Scotland and came to India at the age of 18. He became a planter, during which time he studied birds, butterflies, and dragonflies. His work include with Baker the birds of southern India, including Madras, Malabar, Travancore, Cochin, Coorg, Mysore, and with Fletcher, T.V. Fletcher, he wrote the birds of Indian gardens. The eastern race of Ashiprinia is called the Prinia socialis inglesi, named after him. The western Assam race of Manipur bush quail, I don't know if I'll ever see this bird in my life, is also named after him. And these are some of his books that he printed and a copy of the front page of the journal. Dr. Diwar. Dr. Diwar, he was a barrister, Auditor General of the Indian Civil Service, a very careful observer of bird life. Wrote several books, including Bombay ducks, not the fish that you eat, this is Bombay ducks, proper ducks. Indian birds, birds of the plains, glimpse of Indian birds, a calendar of northern India, a bird calendar of northern India, sorry, a glimpse of Indian birds and an account of everyday birds that were found, around. So he was not really collecting, but he was more of an observer. And he brought in photography, as you can see on the right, is a photograph in black and white. Next we have Kinnear, the curator of the Museum of BNHS between 1907 and 1919, and also the assistant editor of the BNHS journal. He retired in 1950, knighted in June of that year. He was one of the founders of the Society for the History of Natural History. And he wrote 2 papers in the BNHS on the history of Indian ornithology and mammalogy. The Rufus Berry Hawk Eagle is named after him. So these are professional biologists, zoologists who were working in India. Another guy, Ludlow, Frank Ludlow, OBE, Englishman stationed in Lhasa. So he knew the high altitude. As you can see from the bird in the middle, that's a Ludlow's pulveta. So after studying in Cambridge, he came to the Sindh College in Karachi and later joined the Indian Education Service. So those who can speak English would be thankful to him. Maybe he added English as one of our subjects. In 1927, he retired and lived in Srinagar, Kashmir and traveled extensively in the Himalayas. He later took charge of the British mission in Lhasa, used his time to study his natural history, collecting birds, botanical specimens. He had 7,000 bird specimens housed in the Natural History Museum. And of course, the Ludlow's pulveta, named after him, and also the South Tibet subspecies of the little owl is named after him. Here is a photograph on the corner, him sitting in Tibet. Frank Finn. His name came up very recently, of course, because of the Finn's buyer. So he was born in UK, went on collecting expedition in East Africa. He was the first assistant superintendent of the Indian Museum in Calcutta. And that's where he found the Finn's buyer from the Calcutta market. Prolific author. His works included the garden and aviary birds of India, how to know the birds, how to know the Indian ducks, birds of Calcutta, how to know Indian waders. This would be mighty useful. We still don't know how to do Indian waders. And the making of species and Indian sporting birds. Now that's not what we want to read anymore. None of these shooting games. So the beaver bird, the Ploceus megarynchus, was originally described from a specimen collected by Hume from Kaladongi, Nainital in 1869. It was rediscovered near Calcutta by Finn and Baker. And the second edition, it was added in the second edition of British Fauna India. There are a lot of debates about that he found in Calcutta. It was not found in the field. It was bought from somebody. So most likely the bird came from Nainital itself. So what became like the eastern Finns is not really the same Finns beaver that he collected. They're different species. So there's a lot of confusion about the eastern buyer beaver along with this Finn's buyer that he collected from here. Now, this bird was procured from Tehri Bazaar in Calcutta, and sometime later, a dozen other birds landed up and was brought for training by a Parsi resident who took them to England for exhibitions. So the two birds on which I was able to re-establish the species, which Mr. Hume had first named from two skins, were obtained from the late Mr. Rutledge from Entally. So that in Calcutta, one of the best chances of coming across the rarest and the least known Indian birds. That's what he writes in the Garden and Aviary Birds of India. So after Finn, next one, Hugh Whistler, whose books we have read when we started birding. English ornithologist, served with the Indian police in Punjab, another policeman, studied and collected birds, and on retiring to England, he continued his research on Indian ornithology. So his most famous book, of course, is the Popular Handbook of Indian Birds. And he also made collection trips to Spain and Albania in the company of Ticehurst. So his publication of the Popular Handbook of Indian Birds happened in 1928. Two more editions were published, and the last one was produced after his death. So it was one of the basic handbooks that people used in India. So I've seen the copy of that book. So his collection had 17,000 birds, which are now in the Natural History Museum. Whistler's warbler is named after him. Andaman race of the red-whiskered bulbul is named after him. The northwestern race of the Niltava is named after him. The Western Himalayan race of white-throated laughing thrush is named after him, and a northwestern race of the golden bush robin is named after him. Next, we are getting more into 1900s. The Horace Gundry Alexander. He was a teacher, writer, and ornithologist. He wasn't a collector, and he was now getting into habitat conservation. These guys. So you can see Sultanpur Bird Sanctuary. He was instrumental behind pushing it, and he was a good friend of Gandhi. And he demonstrated the use of binoculars as an acceptable alternative to the gun. More to my liking, and carried them around. As you can see, his photograph on the left, he's got his binoculars sticking out from his jacket. So he accompanied Dillon Ripley to the expedition in Naga Hills in 1950. He associated himself with a group of bird watchers in New Delhi and encouraged Indian ornithologists like Usha Ganguly Lachampa to get into birding. Wrote several articles on Indian birds. And in '84, he was awarded the Padma Bhushan. Next person, I don't think I'll spend much time talking about him. The father of modern Indian ornithology, the Birdman of India. What can I say? My first bird book is over here, the Book of Indian Birds. Next is The Fall of the Sparrow, his autobiography, The Indian Hill Birds, Field Guide to Birds of Eastern Himalayas, Birds of Kerala, and the list goes on. So he was orphaned at the age of 10. He was brought up by his maternal uncle, and he was introduced to serious study of birds by Millard, the secretary of the NHS, who helped him to identify the special yellow-throated sparrow, which he had shot. So that's how it all started. So he was educated in Mumbai. He didn't finish his education. Instead, went to Burma, took up his family work, which he didn't do very well. He returned back to India, and he became graduated in the Bachelor of Arts and then a degree in zoology. He failed to get an ornithologist position in ZSI. Sad. The lack of academic qualification. But later he was hired as a guide lecturer in the Natural History section of the Prince of Wales Museum in Mumbai. Went to Germany, was trained under Professor Stresemann of Berlin University. Came back to India in 1930 and moved to Kihim, a coastal village, where he started making his first observation of buyer weavers, and he had publications after publications after publications. He was elected the Fellow of Indian National Science Academy in 1958, received 3 honorary doctorates, nominated in the Rajya Sabha in 1985, and unfortunately he died in 1987, age of 91. Wrote several important books, including his autobiography, The Fall of the Sparrow. The South Central Peninsula subspecies of the rock quail is named after him. There are a lot of fins. The fins buyer, the eastern fins, is subspecies named after him. And today the Himalayan thrush is named after him, thanks to Shashank and his team. So his devoted wife Tehmina had a subspecies named subspecies of black rump flameback named after her. The Dendrochium Tehmina named after her. So these are some of the photographs of Salim Ali. Here is him with Dillon Ripley. He was in Fatehgarh at the bottom right corner. That's him on a motorbike, which he took to UK and rode around on that. They're all motorbike freaks. And him getting his Padma Bhushan, bottom left corner. Not many of his photographs smiling though. Bates, next in line, a colonel in the Indian Army, pioneered in bird photography in India and wrote Breeding Birds of Kashmir with Lautar, an illustrated guide to habits and habitat of 150 species native to Kashmir. He also wrote Bird Life in India and a note entitled History of Bird Photography in India. So, photography is coming into the scene slowly, 1950s. Many of his, Salim Ali paid him a handsome tribute in obituary. Many of his portraits of the Indian birds must still rank among the finest. You can see some of the samples of little bittern and wood owls. So he loved India and his countryside, and he loved Kashmir. most of his holidays were spent in the smaller valleys of the state. He joined BNHD in 1981, became a life member, and regular contributions, published works on the impression of Pachmari birds. A lot of herbariums finally reached the Kew Gardens. Habits of some Indian birds, fighting among birds. So the list goes on. So, a lot of contribution from Bates. Dillon Ripley, next. Very recent. He wrote The Birds of Bhutan. He's an American ornithologist from New York. And he came to India at the age of 13 and went on a walk in Ladakh, Western Tibet. And that led to his lifelong interest in ornithology in India. He obtained a PhD in zoology from Harvard, became friends with Ali, and that partnership changed the face of Indian ornithology. And he served as secretary of Smithsonian Institution between 64 and 84, 20 years. And he has the Dillon Ripley Center named after him. And he produced those 10 volumes of the handbook, along with Ali, the Bible for the Indian bird watchers. So he worked with Ali, Biswas. He worked in southern Western Ghats, on the species, the subspecies of the oriental bay owl from Western Ghats. It's called Spodellas bardius ripley. So the spiny, he searched on the spiny babbler rail, another book from Nepal. Bertram Smythe, born in Nainital, British forester, outstanding field ornithologist, botanist. He took up his work in Burma in 1934 and explored the botany and ornithology of the Burmese pigeons. Post pull-out from Burma, he was posted in Sarawak, and he obviously wrote The Birds of Burma, which was one of the best books that he could get for Burma for a long time. And he also produced a 300-page annual checklist of birds of Borneo. I'm probably taking too much of your time. We come down to real modern, Abdullah Ali, Indian ornithologist, cousin of Salim Ali. He started ornithology by collecting bird eggs. If you don't have binoculars, that's what you do. You start collecting things. And like Charles Macken said of him that he knew something about everything. So he was obviously very keen from a very young age. He started in St. Xavier's College in Bombay and put up a collection of birds, which led to publication of 6-part series of Birds of Bombay and Sunset in BNHS journal. Co-authored by Salim. His first publication was in 1931 on 11 quail eggs in a crow's nest. He published 348 notes in his lifetime, and he did 2 expeditions in Andaman Nicobar. Several species were described by him, a lot of subspecies were described by him. And he proposed the forest areas of the R.A. Mill colony, which is now being attacked because of development and metro rail, etc., up to the Vasai Creek to be a national park. So 100 square kilometer of that area was notified as Borivali National Park by the Government of India in 1960. It was renamed as Sanjay Gandhi National Park. It was all Abdullah Ali's doing. He was also instrumental in drafting the Bombay Wild Animals and Wild Bird Protection Act, which became the main draft for the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Then we have a homegrown Bengali scientist, ornithologist, taxonomist, Dr. Bismillah Biswas, born in Calcutta, brilliant student, gold medalist at his graduation. He also studied under Erwin Stressman, and he received his PhD in 1952. And from the University of Calcutta was part of the Daily Mail expedition, which went to the Mount Everest area for the search of Yeti. So Dr. Biswas was the joint director of ZSI until his retirement in 1981. He adopted the modern genus concept and published the checklist of genera of Indian birds in 1953, which was the basis of all future taxonomic paper for the subcontinent. Field scientist, a meticulous collector, his landmark work was on the birds of Nepal and Bhutan. And there's a flying squirrel in Namdapha, which has been named after him, the Vishnuptera Biswasi, in his honor. He did a lot of collections in Salt Lake areas before Salt Lake became a city. That was one of his pioneering work. A lot of bird bringing used to go on over here, and he took very active part in getting Narendra, which is the CKDS, Chintamani Kaur Wildlife Sanctuary, declared as a protected area. So he was very instrumental for this. The last person, not the last but one, the Bengali ornithologist from Kolkata, Ajay Home. He was the author of several textbooks on ornithology in Bengali, Banglar Pakhi, whose cover design was done by Satyajit Ray, Chena Pakhi, and Bang Bichitro Jeep Jontu, a plethora of animals. Home wrote several Indian wildlife journals, contributed regularly to several magazines, including Sandesh, Desh, Kishore Gyan Vigyan, etc. He was a founder member of Prakriti Samsad, where I started my journey in learning birds and other natural history in 1970. I was not from 1978, but he was, the organization was formed in 1978, which I joined in 1989, and I'm very thankful of where I am today for the organization. And he was also the founder of the editor of the Prakriti Gyan magazine on nature. Another person from Calcutta, Satyajit Law, wealthy naturalist, amateur ornithologist, intellectual. He was for a while a treasurer of the Indian Statistical Institute, a fellow of ZSI, a Zoological Society of London. And in 1937, Neeraj Singh Chaudhary became his literary assistant. He wrote the books on various topics including birds, pet birds of Bengal in 1923. The Lahabadi is very famous because people used to go there to see various exotic birds in cages. So he was also the president of the Indian Zoological Garden for a while because he understood pet birds and bird keeping as an agriculturist. He was the founder of the journal Prakriti in Bengali, and he died in 1984. Last person on the list, Zafar Fateh Ali, served as the honorary secretary of BNHS from 63 to 74, responsible for popularizing field ornithology at amateur level. His newsletter for bird watchers, I was a subscriber for several years, started in 1961. And the newsletter served as an important medium for contributions, mainly by bird watchers, as BNHS journal was becoming a bit too scientific for average people. So he was instrumental in getting the government of Maharashtra to declare Karnala near Mumbai as a bird sanctuary. After that, the list goes on. There is not much time today. I've already taken away 1.5 hours of your time. Thank you so much. I'll finish off here. It could take another 2 days to go through all the birders who are still working in the field, contributing to ornithology. Thank you very much. And
so, John, I have a question.
Right. Yes, sure. Please. Yes, please do.
You avoided Colonel Maynard Zagan. Any reason because of the negative stigma attached? Because he did a lot of.
It's not about negative. Actually, when I was going through the research, the list was so long that I had to take out some names. So because you see, he's already taken up 1.5 hours just to name these. There are actually now 25 names which I could have kept. So, yeah, there was no real particular reason, really. Obviously, what Magnazin did and controversy has nothing to do with me. I'm not involved in his doubtful work. But obviously, yes, he did a lot of
he did a lot of collection.
He did a lot of collection. What he did was he mislabeled that and made a whole fuss about the whole thing, which is why today Pamela Rasmussen almost discounted everything that he found all his life. But he's just one. But there are a lot of other people who were also very important. But I had to pick and choose, the names and contribution. So I can go on for another 2 hours.
No, this was fantastic. I must tell you, this was fantastic. This was a very different perspective altogether, and I really loved it. Thank you, and thanks to Manu for doing it. Fantastic job.
I also did a bit of research, so helped me learn about a lot of things. A lot of names we take for granted, but again, you know. Right. Yes.
Yeah, Shrini is here.
Yes, yes. Hello.
Yes,
Shrini.
please, you said that it will take 2 more days to almost cover the entire thing. So
Yes,
please,
yes.
I will request you to arrange for it in next Sunday and the Sunday after that.
In future, yes, I will do it.
Please do that because it's really informative and very interesting.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your patience, for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sujanda. It was an excellent session and most importantly uninterrupted. I must say, Sujanda is the guy of luck for us. The last uninterrupted season was by Ognimitra, and Sujanda was present, as far I remember, as a viewer. So please stay with us in future for our future sessions.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we have seen that history is a very important thing to deal with any subject, be it science, be it humanities. One cannot proceed without the history. It actually develops the love for the subject and for further scientific advancement. One must learn from the history which paths should be taken, which paths should be avoided. All are provided by the history. So it was a very insightful session. Thank you, Sujanda, for the fascinating history of the Indian bird watching. Thank you, viewers, for your patient hearing. As I discussed earlier, the session will now be on 1 month, one session per month basis. We will come to you again in the next month with another resource person or Sujanda, as viewers are expecting, to talk another topic on wildlife and conservation. Till then, stay safe, keep safe, and good luck.
Keep an eye on the society page in Facebook. I'll keep on writing on each of these people in more detail as much as possible, and keep on filling up. And eventually, hopefully, on our Birdwatching Society website, we will have a section where we can keep the history of birdwatching and ornithology in India, updated over there, along with the people who are working today. They have completely missed out on this topic. There's so many people working on birds, so we'll keep on adding to that. List is endless. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me over. Thank you for patiently listening.
Thank you, Sujanda.
Good night.
Good night.